Eric, again, welcome again to the podcast. Welcome to Uganda. It's such a pleasure and honor. I've been reading some of your work in the past 1 week, seeing what you're trying to do, and it's really impressive. I'm also honored the team reached out to have you on the podcast. So really, I've been telling my whole team about this. Very shocked you came so early. We expected you to come like at around 4:30 when we were ready, but you watched through the whole process of how we put up a conversation. We are one of the podcasts in the country, but we're also a production house. We produce the most podcasts in the country. So yes, Eric, I'll let you do your introduction since you know yourself better for the listeners, then we'll drive the conversation from there.
It's great to be here, Mark. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your support of the young people, not just of Uganda, but of the region. And it was fun watching you and your team work. An audience gets to see the finished product, but that's just a little bit of the heart and soul that goes into an endeavor like yours. It's everything that happens before and after, the commitment, the engineering, the heart, the sweat. And I think that's a great metaphor for my journey at Peace First. Peace First was born out of this idea that if we are going to do anything to save our planet, to save ourselves, to take care of one another, to feed, clothe, house those who need it, to fight for justice, to fight for equality, we have got to equip young people with the tools to do that work. And I started this work as a young person. I was 18 when I helped start Peace First with a group of other young people. And being here with you on this podcast is a great opportunity to not share my story, but the story of thousands and thousands and thousands of Ugandan youth who are already involved in this work, and millions of young people across the region who are hungry to serve their communities, to be not just seen as victims or perpetrators or the future, right? We do that with young people.
Me and you share two things. I think that one thing in common, I am also, besides just being a young person myself, I have a history of being on the street. So I relate to all the stigmas around the country, of how the real depth of what it is to survive in a country where almost all odds are against you at every level. Even when you attain some good education, there's a barricade, there's some limitation, there's still a chosen class of people that will take that. The systems around here are, it's really so much about surviving for yourself than there's no collective effort, yeah? So when you see young people from here making it out, it's incredible. And when you see people like you come out to support, I've been reading, you've given a lot of grants in the past years to a lot of projects. It brings up some level of hope, and yet personally I don't have even, previously I've given up on hope because I feel like it's a bit misleading whenever you hope onto things. So, but when I see work you are doing, and when I was surprised when the team reached out to have this, it was inspiring to me. I was like, actually, yes, this is the right platform. Someone like him should be. This is such a good moment for us to have a story shared, because besides just this podcast, we have all this other content we're creating with young people in the streets, in the ghettos, all that. So when they listen to that, to me, it's just not, they don't listen to me because it's TV or to listen to this, but they listen to it because I am part of them. I am from them. It's cool. They're seeing one of them go to a different level and give back to the community. So it's collective effort. They help create the content. Now, when they hear this firsthand from you, I think it's incredible. So yeah, I'm still very grateful that you chosen to come to the podcast.
I admire the journey that you're on, and as you know, as a father, as a leader, the journey never stops, right? We keep trying to evolve, we keep trying to better ourselves, and to bring others along with us. So, I came here to learn. I came here to honor the young people who are doing such amazing work. It's interesting. I am the CEO of Peace First, but the grants that we give out here in Uganda don't come from me. They come from the team that's based here who make the decisions. This organization is run by young people. Our Aziz, who's our fellow in residence, who runs our work in sub-Saharan Africa, he recruits, he mentors, he decides who gets a grant. 50% of our board globally are young people, including Hamed, who is a young person from Nigeria. And so and this isn't false humility, I'm one of many people who make this work. And there are lots of stories we could tell about Uganda. There's lots of stories we could tell about this region. There's lots of stories we could tell about young people.
So one of the things about this production house is our tagline is actually only humans tell stories. But previously, the tagline was storytelling the African way. We just felt like keeping it African will limit us to some level. So only humans telling stories. Every other person is a human, so everyone has a story to tell, and it's theirs to tell. So when we're talking with Aziz about all these projects you've been running, and when I was going through them, I was like, I'd love to be part of the Peace First, because here's how I can add the value, and they're in line with exactly what I want. I want to showcase all these stories in a way that the individuals that have lived them can, first of all, get means to tell the stories cheaper way, and just have constant platform. When you look at big conversations by ordinary people, it's as ordinary as it is. Today I have you, the CEO of Peace First, but 2 episodes back I had a janitor here who were talking about how they survive their day-to-day life. So to me, that's also part of it, telling stories. So yeah.
Well, what I appreciate about that is, so we could tell a story about the region, which is about poverty, about lack of opportunity. We could tell stories about war and conflict. Those are true stories. We could also tell stories about a youthful population that is energized, that is entrepreneurial, that is passionate. We could tell stories about resources and wisdom. We can tell stories about connectivity. We can tell stories about some of the most brilliant ideas that I've seen and heard in 30 years. And we get to choose which stories we tell and invest in. And so as I look across the region, and we've invested in and supported in almost 3,000 projects at this point. I mean, these are young people who we are often their first yes. Because we tell young people, I mean, the world tells young people no all the time. And that's doubly true for young people in the region. And you and I both know, if you don't have access to capital, whether that's financial capital or social capital, or imagination capital, right? If you don't see people like you leading change, you don't get started. And so Peace First is often a young person's first yes. And we've invested about $150,000 in these $250 increments in young people's ideas. We don't ask young people for receipts. Our message to young people is we trust you. You know what your community needs. Go out and do it. But at the end of the day, it's not about the money. I mean, money is transformative and important. Like, let's not lie. But it's that belief, right? It's that network of being part of young people across 160 countries and being able to build and create and drive together.
How does, well, I am privileged that I am publishing somewhere on the internet, so as is found out about the podcast, and we've also invested a chatbot to making sure we amplify the information spread out. But how does Peace First then reach? I want you to this is probably another conversation I'm supposed to have with Aziz since he's here, but why not have it with you? How does a child who has an idea down in the ghetto reach out to Peace First? And by this, I don't mean, by them being in the ghetto, I mean they have limited or no access to the internet. They probably don't have a stable education background. So, and they're on the hustle, they're on the rise, they're looking for what to eat. It's hand to mouth. So their time is very important for them to have the luxury to put in some information to find out what that these guys will give in grants. How does then Peace First get to that person to make them have their first yes?
Being a change maker, so helping change the world, shouldn't be a privilege. And in fact, those who are closest to the problems are closest to the solutions, right? That's our insight. And so young people are uniquely positioned to change the world. That's a given. If you look at 120 years of social change, it has been led by young people, and often by young people who've been marginalized, often because of poverty, because of the color of their skin, because of all of those things that tell those young people you're not good enough or you don't belong. Those young people know what the problems are and they know how to solve them. If you think about traditional NGOs and how they operate, we've been blowing up that model. So they're often from the United States or they're from Europe. They've got big, expensive staff who look like me, right? Middle-aged, often white, more degrees than are necessary. We spend our days writing memos, and then more staff that we supervise, and then eventually those resources trickle down to the ground. And I don't mean any disrespect to my colleagues, but that's what we've done for hundreds of years as a way of solving problems. This, at Peace First, we say that's backwards. So instead, our digital platform is always on. You don't have to be in a classroom at 2:00 on Thursday going through a program, right? We're not a program. We're not a curriculum. You don't have to be at a certain place at a certain time going through an adult-led set of activities. Instead, the way we operate is when a young person decides that they want to get involved, they can go to peacefirst.org and get started. Whenever. It could be midnight. It could be a Thursday. It could be January. And they can take, as long as they want to create a project, they can start and stop. Our job is to follow young people's lead. I just want to pause to explain how radical that is. That's so different from any other NGO development program that's out there, right? I don't decide what problems we're solving, right? I didn't say in my office in Boston, oh, let's go to Uganda. I'm going to open up an office and hire a staff. We're here because young people found out what we were doing and decided that they wanted to get started on their journey.
So then what informs your presence to help these young people in Uganda? Is it just the projects that, how do you trust if you're not here? How do you bridge the gap between them and the authenticity of what they're trying to sell out?
So I think about faith as an organizing principle. So whatever one's religion might be, or even no religion, that involves a bedrock faith, right? Things you can't necessarily see or touch. You make a decision to root your life. we've decided to organize our entire organization around believing in young people and trusting young people. So when young people come to our platform, the first question we ask is, how can we help? Again, I want to just pause on how radical that is.
Like the whole vision of how you then help.
And that statement, right? Or that question. So how can I help puts the power in young people's hands. I'm not saying, let me help you or let me tell you what I would do. So young people in the driver's seat of creating their projects. So our work in Sub-Saharan Africa took off because I met a young woman named Victoria in Lagos, and she was at a conference and we passed each other in the hall at the UN. And I was describing what I do, and I say, we give grants to young people. And she paused me and she said, what do you mean? And I said, we give grants to young people. So I have this idea of starting an after school program in Lagos. But, I don't have a NGO. I'm not part of a bigger organization. Like, that's okay. Like, we'll give you money however you need to get it. And she could not believe that an organization would fund her that wasn't part of UNICEF or the government or a church, but would just trust her as an early 20s female African leader to create a project. And then she told a dozen of her friends, and they told a dozen of their friends. And that's how we've spread. And so this is not a top-down model. It is young person to young person. And so the idea is that we support people digitally. We take them step by step on how to create a project. What do you care about? How do you see the problem? We help them do research. We help them create a project plan and a budget. Once that project's ready, and it may take some time to get it ready, we provide funding, they implement it, and then they evaluate the impact of their project. And then we help them connect to other young people as they grow. Now, as we're gaining so much traction in the region, Aziz and our terrific ambassadors across the region are asking, what more can we do? And young people are saying, well, we want to connect with each other. Or, okay, I've done my project. I want to take it to the next level. I need help on fundraising and marketing. Or I want to learn about how young people are doing this in other regions of the world. So we're in the process of redesigning our platform and website around accessibility. So right now it's
going to online expression. I know a lot of myself, inclusive, a lot of young people with a lot of ideas, and thank God now I know about Peace Fast, but it's interesting that I know a lot of young people who have failed to pursue their ideas because, of course, there's lack of capital. When you look at the statistics, they keep saying Uganda is up there with having a lot of entrepreneur Ugandans, but the businesses still don't survive. And it's because of all those reasons, but topmost has to be, there's no capital. Accessing capital, grants, the people that, it's collective, it's always certain classes of people that have different kind of privilege that it's easier for them to get the grants. But when you say it's just that easy, that all I have to do is to go to peacefast.org and submit my project to get a grant, then that's interesting.
Yeah, and it takes a while to get a project ready. So
yeah, I know, but just having it ready.
And one of our challenges is our platform right now is language intensive. So think about a young person who has low literacy. How can we let them do stuff in video? Or can they submit stuff via WhatsApp so they don't have to use limited minutes to be on the internet? We've got limits around language and accessibility. Not everyone knows English. Even think about languages like French, which is important for the region, but also Swahili. So how do we diversify our offerings in different languages? And then, you started this question with a real challenge for us is we are a digital design studio. So we're a place where young people can go to dream up how they want to change the world. That's great, but that first word, digital, also cuts young people off. So how do we support young people who can't even access that? And it may be that's not our organization's job, that there are others for whom that's their work, right? Organizations can only do so much. But we're also looking at who are the partners who help with that piece of the work. So where are the on-the-ground NGOs, the faith-based groups, the schools, who can help young people who don't have the internet access to get connected in that way. And what I love about our work is, Aziz and our ambassadors in the region are building and designing in real time based on what they're learning. And so what Peace First looks like on the ground today is different than it looked like 2 months ago, and it will look different in 3 months because young people's needs change and the world changes.
So I've also read that education is one of those ways you're trying to impact this change, but also the systems of education we already have that I don't want to say they have failed, because still the more educated people have still produced the best results in the societies and communities we live in. But there's a bias on how to switch, since it's not a trend set by our leadership. So how then do I get the confidence to trust the alternative ways from Peace First?
Who do you think education is designed for?
Everyone.
Adults.
Adults.
Education systems around the world are ultimately designed around adult needs. Teachers, parents, administrators, with kids in mind. But ultimately the folks who are doing that work are adults. What would it look like if young people could reimagine their systems? Right? What would it look like if young people could recreate what the Ugandan education system would look like? Like, what if we unleash that creative power on education? And I could say that about almost any country, including the US. And I've been very involved in education work, and we used to run school-based programs, and I finally stopped because what I realized is I didn't want to have gatekeepers between us and young people. And that's what's great about being able to do this work digitally, is you don't have to be in a classroom, right? You don't have to be, you don't have a teacher who is mediating, controlling young people designing and creating projects. And so I think about Peace First as an educational system in the sense that we are helping teach young people how to do social change, how to create and build projects.
How are you doing this?
By giving young people tools on how to do everything from design a project to explore where the problem comes from, how to conduct interviews of people who are affected by the problem, how to interview people who are causing the problem, how to put together a budget, how to run a meeting. Those are all skill sets. And I would argue the kind of skill sets an employer wants, right? That's problem solving, budgeting, planning, management, team management. Like, these are the critical skills that folks need to be employed. But it's not a sit in your seat, listen to me talk at you curriculum that we all experienced. It's tools that young people get to pick and choose what they want when they need it. It's putting young people in the driver's seat of their education. Think back to your schooling. Imagine if you got to choose what you studied and how you studied it.
I think that would be fun, really. Honestly, it was too much. I think when you get into S1, you have about 20 subjects, and you drop them at around S3. You drop and keep around 13. It's just too much for just qualifications, because you then how you pass each individual subject determines how you qualify for the next class, like that. So you have to literally put so much in your head for nothing. There's stuff like cooking. It's not even relevant. I don't want to say it's not irrelevant, but you need it. You need to learn it, but you need to have some sense of focus, and we don't get that from the system. We don't still get the soft skills, even though one would argue, even those that get these skills are still, when they're employable, it's still not enough. People are still looking for programmers, designers, people who are doing really hard to get a very comfortable sense of living, to be able to probably do something like a podcast, to buy its equipment.
That's right.
And to have a team. The soft skills alone can only get you, when you look at the jobs that are employable jobs around here, there's still so much to catch up with. They still don't add so much.
And how much of your education felt like your teachers were opening up your head and stuffing information in there?
Literally all of it, because at some point I had to drop out of it. I was like, can I just go and study? I can just do, because I dropped out of the curriculum and took on my own computer science. Because it was just too much. And by then I didn't realize it was that, but I was not a dumb student. I was really smart from my school. I started school, but I got frustrated. There was so much, there was always so much to.
And no application. Piece First is all about application because you're creating a project. So imagine if your whole education was built around a project. So imagine if your school was all about putting together a podcast. Like that's what you did. Like your whole day, your whole week, your whole semester was putting on a podcast. And you had to research the subject. You had to write copy about what you were going to say, right? That's language arts, that's research, that's history. You had to put together a budget of a podcast, right? That's maths, right? Those are all of the things that you need to learn in school, but you're applying it to something that's relevant and that you care about. So I think about Piece First as an education tool. Exactly. And that you're in the driver's seat. Right? That you get to say, I mean, even like volunteer work or community development work or social change work is more often than not an adult or an NGO telling young people what to do. It's telling you to volunteer here or collect something here. We don't tell young people what problems to solve or how to solve it, right? They get to be in control. Now we have values. So we care about courage. We want young people to take risks, to stretch themselves, to grow. We care about collaboration, teamwork. It's not about the single individual. You need to bring other people along with you. And we care about compassion. We care about crossing lines of difference. We care about looking at what sits beneath the problem. So there are constraints to what we will fund. But those are about values, not about themes or outputs.
Speaking of output, do you feel like the education system, which is the first step to anyone who needs to really get some definition of what they might term as success, needs to be overhauled to more like, because right now we are following a system that is not even applicable here. We are a project culture, so mostly how we are designed to think is how a first country was designed. So it's not really in sync with what we're doing. Do you think that would be a better solution to have it overhauled?
So I can't speak to anything about the Ugandan context, and it would feel disrespectful to speak to the specific context. What I can speak to is this broader need that I think exists globally to put young people in the driver's seat of those solutions. So the question I have for us is, who is doing that problem solving? Is it researchers at a university? Is it global NGOs out of Finland or McKinsey who come to study the Ugandan education system and write a paper for the Ministry of Education? Or is it the young people who are engaged in that education system, given not just the permission, but the resources to reimagine what education needs to look like? That, I think, would be exciting. And in every context around the globe. I mean, that I think is the missing piece, is where what we consider expertise. And what gets ignored time and time again is lived experience. So,
but that also brings up the question with, even when you look at all the startups that rise here, it's you're talking about employment. They're all replicas of Silicon Valley startups. They're not really built to solve the Ugandan problems with people, because of course then the people who can build startups that solve Ugandan problems and actually living the Ugandan problems, because it's the majority, it's not like the different percentage that is privileged, cannot get access to fund to kickstart whatever projects they're doing. Let me just then bring this question in a way that what informs what type of project qualifies to get a grant with Peace First?
So there are three things. One is they need to solve a real problem, what we call an injustice, versus an inconvenience. So an example I think of is my daughter's school has a dress code. They're limited in what they could wear. That's an inconvenience, right? Rather than an injustice. But the fact that the dress code only applies to girls and the boys can wear whatever they want, that's an injustice, right? So we help young people think about the difference between those two things, right? So we spend time helping them really understand the problem. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they need to have a plan about what they want to do to create a solution that needs to involve our 3 C's. So it needs to involve and think about risk, both where they're going to stretch themselves, but also how they're going to keep themselves and the other young people safe. We care a lot about safety. They need to think about how they're going to involve people from different sides of the problem. So this idea of compassion. And then they need to have a team of at least 3 people. So they have to have a plan. And then the third is they have to have a budget. And they have to be under 26. And that's it.
Okay, good. What do you think about violence in people?
I'm glad you started with a small question, Mark. I appreciate that. I don't have enough context, except to say that it's my belief that, broadly speaking, that violence is learned behavior. And I think across the world, we do a really good job of teaching it in different ways, of modeling it, of celebrating it. I remember being, staying with some friends in another part of the continent, and it was a couple that was having an argument, and the father was yelling at the mother about something, which is a form of violence, the tearing down of someone. And then the mother would hit the oldest child for doing something because she was angry. And I remember watching that happen, and they had a 18-month-old at the time, maybe even younger. I remember watching this little kid walk up to her big sister after her mother had beat her and started doing the same thing. And I just think about all the ways that we pass on our legacy of violence all over the world. I mean, it's the trauma.
I understand why you call it a small question, because I I limited it to just Africa. But this was also a context of, well, you see, my worry and problem here is probably the guy that doesn't have what to eat might come in here to steal a camera. Yeah? But when you read the news, you know that someone living, let's say, in the USA, their worry could be their neighbor down could shoot them down. It's not the same thing, but my access to guns here is not the same. So it was, but then I feel, well, again, I wouldn't want us to go into the politics of the government, but it's hard to avoid questions of mistreatment and on all types of levels, my rights, how I feel. So this also informs how I come up with projects, how I want to change, how I see my society. I'm already deteriorated by the fact that, you know what, it's only a selected few that would get out there, but the rest, it's tough. That's the reality. Even those who make it to, it's tough. The violence is in all sorts of ways, yeah? It's just, the system is violating my rights. That's...
What I know is that people that are hurt people. And we as a global society need to stop hurting people in everything that we do. And I think the most damaging thing that we have is shame. I think that is the most destructive form of violence that we have, is those things that make people feel deeply bad about who they are. There was a professor, James Gilligan, who wrote a book called Violence, where he studied men, they're all men, who were in jail for horrendous crimes, multiple murders, violent rapes. And they had one thing in common, is that they had all experienced violence themselves. So they were reproducing that experience in what the crimes they'd committed. They'd all experienced violence. And the other piece of it was they had all experienced deep episodes of shame, sexual abuse or other things that had made them feel broken. And those are things that I think we need to pay attention to as a society. So, you have programs that might give people food, but they're not thinking about the dignity of work. And so as I think about what I love most about Peace First is that value of trust with young people.
What would project our future of Peace First?
So, I mean, the big news for me personally is I'm stepping down in a couple of weeks. And I've been working on this for 3 years. So I've been doing this for 30 years. I started Peace First with other young people when I was 18. And I've had 18 different versions of this job. So at first we were a curriculum that went into schools. And then we were a whole school model working with parents and teachers. And then we created this digital platform. And then we had young people all over the world signing up, and realized that we couldn't sustain this with 3 community managers in Boston, Massachusetts. So we began hiring talented social entrepreneurs like Aziz based around the world. And so it became clear to me 3 years ago that I wanted to see that journey happen. I wanted to do this last transformation from a US-based, really adult-led organization to a youth-driven global organization. And we've done that. The majority of our staff are young people. The vast majority of our staff are based around the world. And I'm incredibly proud of the team and what they've done. And I make less and less sense to be the organization's leader, because I am neither a young person, nor do I have any global experience. I mean, I've traveled, but my lived experience is all in the United States. And so as we went about looking for a new CEO, we did a few things that were really interesting. The first is we decided not to look for a COO, but co-CEOs, in the hopes that it would make the positions more accessible. So someone who's a young person in Uganda might say, I don't think like I could be a global CEO and do all that fundraising, but I know a ton about digital communities, and so I could do that work. And so maybe that person could be paired with someone who's a really strong fundraiser. So the board in designing this created two roles to make the position more accessible and also to increase the global experience. So you could have a co-CEO who's based in the US and one who's not, or one who's based in Europe and one who's based in sub-Saharan Africa. You could expand the definition of leadership and the vision of leadership for the organization. So that was really exciting. And then to build an organization that could support that kind of leadership. So really working of the board, thinking about who the board was, working to raise a substantial amount of money so that the new leaders had a good financial set of resources to get started. And then I'm doing my doctorate right now on leadership and innovation, and I'm studying CEO transitions because I really wanted to understand how to do this right. It still may not work, but that's what I'm studying. And so the next step for Peace First is on that journey, is to continue to strengthen our offerings, to strengthen our ability to tell stories about the amazing work that young people are doing, to put young people in spaces where they're not, whether it's podcasts or speaking at the UN or on boards. I mean, how many Ugandan youth serving organizations have young people on their board? Not advisory boards, but I mean boards where they're choosing CEOs and voting on budgets. So having more of that advocacy role that I think is so essential, and then continuing to grow and meet the needs of young people. And I think we're set up to do that with the kind of leaders we have, like Aziz.
So you have risen through the ranks of Peace First from easily the first jobs. So you've seen a couple of things being achieved by Peace First, and you probably have a few of your head that you know these were like the greatest moments, these greatest stories that you already have. These are like testimonies that Peace First really is about the young people and the change makers, and you'd love to share them and love to hear them firsthand from you.
It's like asking me which one of my children I love best, Mark. That's a very dangerous question. This is what I will say is that I am less proud of what I have done as a leader, and I'm more proud of what I have watched others achieve. And I mean that sincerely. I'm certainly proud of my work, and there are things I'm embarrassed by. Being a 18 or 22-year-old CEO who had never worked anywhere else, I was not a particularly good manager. I'm still not a particularly great manager. I'm a classic entrepreneur in that way.
How long have you been CEO?
30 years.
30 years?
Yeah.
How then do you know that you're not a good manager? A 30-year experience of managing teams. Then who becomes a good manager in this case if the experience cannot inform that?
So one of the hardest lessons for me to learn as a leader is that there were things that I was good at. And I learned those pretty early on. There are things that I wasn't good at that I could learn to be good at. And there are things that I wasn't good at that I was never going to be great at. Yeah. And really good managers are able to translate between vision, strategy, and operations and implementation, and do that alignment with people's work. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm a classic entrepreneur. I'm good for the first 15 minutes of a project and the last 15 minutes of a project. And on my best days, a distraction for everything in the middle. And so my early days, I felt I had to get good at that. Yeah. And what I realized is the best leaders, Mark, hire people and partner with people who are good at that stuff in the middle. So I'm lucky that I get to work with an amazing team who have those strengths that I don't. So I'm a decent supervisor. I can be a good coach, a good chaplain, like a good listener. But I admire those COOs, those vice presidents, those directors that I've been able to work with over the years who are really good at project management, doing the alignment work. My job is pattern recognition and thinking about where we need to go, telling stories, and some of the detail pieces. But that management piece is not my strength. But I'll tell you what I'm proud of. I'll pick out a couple things. So for a couple years, we had a prize, like a Nobel Peace Prize for young people, where we gave out significant amounts of money to young people who had significant projects. I'm talking $25,000, $50,000. And there was a young person we awarded the prize to who was going to be a cook in a restaurant for his job. And he was able to use that money to become a community organizer around education issues. And he'll run for city council in a couple of years and then mayor. And it's one of those places where I can point to that we change someone's trajectory, who will change his community. And he's just one of those incredible leaders. He was an immigrant refugee, couldn't afford to go to college, did amazing work in high school around a change-making journey, but couldn't afford to keep doing it. Like he had to get a restaurant job. And to give him the kind of resources that he could chase that dream was one of those moments I felt like I was actually changing something. And then there has been getting to meet our fellows and residents. So the way Peace First works is we have what I'd call a central staff. They're based in different parts of the world, whose job it is to run the mechanics of the organization. And I don't mean that dismissively at all. This is incredibly important work. The digital platform, the storytelling, the finance, getting the resources in. And then our fellows are young social entrepreneurs based around the globe who do the recruitment, the coaching, the mini grant giving, and the coordination. And Mark, these are some of the most talented, funny, creative, joyful people I've ever met. And we're in our third year with these folks. And getting to spend time with those leaders, to learn from them, to learn with them, to visit them in their programs, and to watch them grow as leaders has been such a joy.
So how did you develop the ideology of spreading out to sub-Saharan Africa? Because you mentioned earlier on that how you actually spread out is people come onto the site, then they demand for the help. If it's help they're getting. But there has to be need first, yeah, for the help to come. So I'm then wondering how you decided to start supporting sub-Saharan Africa.
So I'll share two stories. One is the biggest shift we made as an organization. And then the second is how we came to become such a driver of impact in this region and what we're learning. So we were a school-based program and a very traditional NGO. We had staff in cities in the United States running programs in schools, largely government funded. And then we did this research where we looked at what has what drives social change over the past 120 years. So we did a series of case studies, and it blew my mind what came back from that. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Matrix.
Yeah.
It was like,
But even the latest one.
it was like, I don't know if it was the blue pill or the red pill. Whatever pill like blows your mind. That was like taking that pill. Because what we learned from that is that every single major shift over the past 120 years that has made the world better has been powered by young people. Young people are drivers of changing our culture. We weren't going to power that by opening up another 3 school partnerships, opening up another office, raising money.
When you isn't change driven with actual government power? Don't you think we also need to put up campaigns where we really, now like for Uganda, where we get young people really involved into leadership positions. This is what we're doing, but it could be just businesses, but at least where they can make actual decisions, to how people live, how people are living, and what's best for people. Because we are suffering from the fact that the people that make most of our decisions do not understand our generation. So they have lived decades ago, and right now they're almost just floating, and they're still making their decisions. But they're alive. They see things. They probably put on Netflix and try to relate on the movies and see what the scriptwriters are doing. But they don't know the actual reality of, and that is where the actual change can come from. Where, you know what? When you look at just our current politics, the opposition is led by a younger person, very young, Bobby Wine. Very energetic, very young, very relatable. He's been on the streets, he's grown here, but he can only still do too little because he doesn't have actual power. Or he can lose some people actually over time. When you follow up to how it has been happening, you can just want to call it noise. There's always going to be someone who's going to come make noise, but there's no actual change. Yeah, it's easier for people to always sell the concept of real changing and helping, but how do you measure the change you want the young people to bring about?
So we want young people to bring about the change they want to bring about, first of all. And that change is happening on multiple levels. So that young person who's starting a project, it might be small and it might fail, but they're changing. So think about where leaders first get to learn how to lead. They gotta practice. Like they gotta figure stuff out. And Peace First gets to be that first place where they get to learn how to do those things. So this isn't about, building 1,000 social impact businesses throughout Africa. I actually don't care so much if a project is quote unquote successful or not. That's not the idea. It's great when they are, because we want young people to have impact. Yeah. But young people are getting the experience of leading change. That's transformative. Then we look at the impact that young people's projects are having and the ideas. So think about Peace First like a venture capital firm, except we're a venture impact firm. We're placing thousands and thousands of bets across the continent. 90% of those ideas will fail and should, right?
Failing should be embraced, man.
And just because you're poor and in Kampala doesn't mean that you shouldn't get the same opportunity as those rich kids in Palo Alto, California, who get to fail all the time, right? You should be allowed to try something out and take a risk. And that's what we want our $250 to let you do, is to bring a new idea to life. And when you bring something that's really new to life, more often than not, it will fail the first time. And you have to try again. And then it will fail again. And then you try again. My 30 years at Peace First has been failure after failure after failure after failure. And every time something has failed, we have shifted it. I spent 20 years running a school-based program and then decided to shut it down with a staff of 90 and start over as an 8-person tech company after doing that research, because we weren't going to really move the needle unless we could directly support young people's change. And so I think about the example of political change. Moving systems takes time. And so planting lots of seeds, changing a mindset. You started our conversation talking about hope or a lack of hope.
Yes.
There's a theorist, an education theorist, Paulo Freire in Brazil, who said that if we struggle without hope, our struggle is suicidal. If we struggle without hope, our struggle is suicidal. And so if Peace First does nothing else but give the young people of Uganda and the young people of this region and the young people of this continent, the young people of the world, hope. And I don't mean theoretical hope, but $250 in your pocket. We've got your back. There are millions of young people with you in this journey, hope. Like, let's hold hands and jump off the cliff together, hope. Then my 30 years will be worthwhile. And the leaders who will come next, journey will be worthwhile. Because that's the powerful ingredient. And maybe Uganda will look different in 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years or 6 decades.
Do you ever follow up on the grants to the young people, or it's up to me?
Absolutely. Yeah, we follow up with them. We don't ask them to keep receipts for their grants, but they have to submit a report on the impact of their work. They get to be part of this community. Many of them come back for a second grant. I'm sure many of them would like larger grants if we could do that for a follow-on. Yeah, the idea is that Peace First ultimately is a community, is a group of people.
Okay. Very interesting question, Great. About since you've gone 30 years at the top, you've also seen these different evolving ways change making has occurred, and maybe you can just paint a picture of all the different versions and what you think works best. Just your experience. Of course, there is no like right formula what can work best to how change can be brought about, but you have an idea, a very good idea, because you have this experience, and you also have seen all these other ways people try to bring about. You yourself, you revamped the whole system, literally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. I appreciate it. So there are 3 threads that I can speak to you about what's changed in the 30 years in terms of how change is happening. One is it's happening much more quickly. Yeah. It's accelerated. So things that might have taken 10 years are taking 10 months. Things just move much more quickly. The second is that young people's access to information and their interconnectivity is radically different. I mean, the internet, and I mean, this was 1992 when I started. I had a pager and thought I was cool with my little beeper. We didn't have cell phone. Like, the internet barely existed. The ability to share ideas and connect, that connectivity is a real driver of change. People know what's going on in the world immediately.
Do you think now, with all this that has come up, we just have a scarcity mindset of just clinging on to what's failing to work and not looking at it in that perspective of look at the speeds of internet we have right now as compared to what NASA had when the first person was on the moon. Yeah, because that's quite just a mobile device. Has enough capability as the computers NASA had then. But then I'm still complaining here and telling you about the issues we're facing. Yeah, because yes, it's yet after moon. So do you think we just have that scarcity mindset?
I think everything is accelerated. Joy, anger, frustration, sadness, isolation, connection. It's just all moving really fast, and we're rushing to catch up with it. And that feels very, very true. The third thing that I've seen amongst young people in change making is they're making connections across issues in really powerful ways.
Also,
They see the intersections between women's rights and sustainability, between education and technology access. So when I was coming up, there were really single lanes that you did work in. And there's still a push to do that. That's not how young people think and work. The interconnectivity across issues is mind-blowing and inspiring.
okay. You've talked about change, and the question escapes my mind. But it comes back. My father at some point told me that the more things change, the more they are again. And I think we picked that quote from someone, but this was because I was trying to explain to him what I do, the podcasting. This is 2 years ago when COVID had just hit. So I'm trying to explain to him about digital publishing, about what, making money. He had a problem with cryptocurrencies and all that stuff. But then he kept telling me that, you see what? You can only do so much, but things, the more you think things are changing, the more they stay the same. But some of the change you talked about were, let's say, women's rights and all that stuff. But most of it now, like in Uganda specifically, because I am based here, I know so much. There's culture, and people have these cultures that abuse these rights that all this activism brings about, but also these cultures have been proven over years to work. There's tangible evidence that because people have been living this type of way, it has worked for them. So everything else seems new. Yeah.
You said something that's just brilliant, Mark, which is worked for whom and worked at what, I think is always the interesting question. So I do think that, the world has changed vastly in my lifetime. And I think about my parents and my grandparents. And I don't mean the technology, which of course is an enabler, but values, culture. I think about my mom, who was able to get an education, but had limited career options when she was first starting out in terms of expectations, and my daughters. Or I think about my children who are multiracial. We're watching a movie where the president and his daughter were in it, who were both white in this movie. They were young, and they turned to me and they said, "That's not the president." And I said, "Why?" And they go, "Because the president can't be white." Just think about that statement, because they had seen Barack Obama, whose family looked like ours. Like that experience is, it's like both intangible, like it's hard to touch and name it, but is so unbelievably radical when you think about the kind of change that the world has seen. The fact that you and I are sitting across from each other, my parents couldn't have imagined this. My grandparents couldn't have imagined this. Could your grandparents have imagined this? And so the word that I keep coming back to is humility. And humility to me is just understanding the limits of my own imagination. Yeah. And so the way I look at it is gratitude for the ways the world continues to get better and the people like you and others who make it better. And then understanding that I have an obligation to continue to learn myself, that experience is not the same thing as wisdom, and that the world is becoming a more interconnected place, but whether it becomes a better place is going to be based on what I choose to do every day.
Okay. Interesting. So, do you have tips for the young people that are going to listen to the podcast about how they can take up leadership positions, or how more vibrant they can get with bring about change into their communities? Yeah? From now and probably the future, or how you envision the future for them, how you basically envision the future for them.
Well, first, Mark, I want to thank you for having me on your podcast. I admire what you're doing. I think stories really matter. And if I think about your wise father and this idea that that things have changed, but some things haven't, I think one thing that hasn't is that we are people of story, and stories matter. And stories are how we create and build relationships, whether we do that listening to the radio or sitting over mashed bananas or what have you. Stories are how we connect. And so thank you for this opportunity to connect with you. I appreciate it. So to young people who are out there, first of all...
We are not concluding with this specific one, please.
Okay. I'm wrapping up too soon?
Yeah.
It was a good wrap up though, huh?
Yeah, but we'll still...
We can just fast forward. So to young people, I say two things. First of all, it's not my job to imagine your future. It's my job to help you do it. And so think about what it is that you want to create in the world, and get started. I think we spend too much time waiting to be ready. My wife and I got engaged very quickly. I should say we had been engaged before. Second time we got engaged very quickly, and we were living in different parts of the country, and she got a job offer to move 4 months sooner than we had decided. And I said, I'm not ready. And what she said to me is you're never going to be ready. We either do this or we don't do this. And so I think that's true for changing the world. It's at some point you just do it. And it might be starting small, it might be starting big, but you need to get started, because the world, Uganda, Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, we need you to get started. And Peace First is here to help. Peacefirst.org is our digital home. We're not always as wonderful as we'd like to be, so sometimes we're slow in getting back because we're overwhelmed with the work at hand. But we're here, and we believe in you and what you want to do.
Interesting. It's very, very nice. Really, thank you that we have people like you coming up. I'm definitely going to look and tell a lot of my friends to look at Peace First, put up projects. I'm going to come up with my own projects, the things I've been intending to do. I want to have a lot of storytelling, regional. Imagine having such conversations, but tied to different cultures, regional, from Western Uganda, Northern Uganda. But to scale that, to make that possible, of course, there's money that needs to be done to build such a team elsewhere and get the conversations. But also now I'm interested in knowing you, Eric Dawson, the person you are, the young man that grows up to have a vision, who then supports others. Who is Eric Dawson as a person? Tell me about you, without Peace First. I want to understand you, the CEO, but you, Eric. What drives you, your motivations, your mantras? Yeah, I want to learn now from you.
So for those listening on the radio, just imagine that I look like Brad Pitt.
That's true, by the way.
I don't know if that's a cultural reference that translates.
To handsome.
Yeah. I'd say Denzel Washington, but that's too far a stretch. I'm not that good looking. I'm a father. I have three beautiful, smart, frustrating children that I love with all my heart. I'm married. My wife is very important to me. We met when we were teenagers. She's also frustrating and lovely. So family is really important to me. Faith is really important to me. And I've been on a faith journey since I was a little kid. I grew up in a multi-religious household and have studied everything. My focus I went to divinity school. My focus was Buddhism. But I think having an interior life is really important. So whether that's based in a particular religious tradition or just taking care of yourself and giving yourself time to reflect and write, I think is really important for everyone to have. I was a weird kid, Mark. My mom tells the story of picking me up from school when I was 8. I don't remember the story, but I'd spent the day designing like the perfect community. And if you think about an 8-year-old child doing that work, you would imagine like drawing trees and animals. I was creating job training programs and economic systems. I was probably a socialist, as all 8-year-olds would be. But I was really interested in systems as a little child, like how things worked, particularly people systems. And so I started at a pretty young age organizing. I went to a large high school, secondary school. My school had, I think about 2,600 students in it. And this was a time when students who had a disability were no longer being educated in separate schools, but being included in my high school. And they weren't treated very well by my fellow students. They were made fun of, they were harassed, in some cases beat up. And a group of us created a program to change that behavior. And what's interesting is there were maybe 5 of us who were involved in it, and I was one of the few who didn't have a personal connection. I didn't have a younger brother or sister with a disability. It just bothered me. And so we began working to change the culture of our high school. So you were talking about education earlier. So it wasn't the principal, it wasn't the teachers, it was student to student changing the culture of our school. And then I wrote my first curriculum. I must have been 16, and taught every elementary school, primary school in my district about disability awareness. And I don't know, I just loved creating things. I was an actor when I was a child. I went out and I got an agent when I was 14 or 15. I did a bunch of commercials that helped me pay for university. I mean, it was like for a bank and a grocery store. I was no Brad Pitt. But it was, you know, I was a hustler. Like, I started my first business when I was 10. I bought candy at the corner store and for 10 pence and sold them for 25. And used that to, they had a race, a go-kart. I don't know if that translates. Racetrack near my school, and I bought a license to go drive cars. I like to cook. I have a really good chocolate chip cookie recipe. I do most of the cooking for my family.
What do you think is like your purpose? what do you define as your purpose in life? And to you, what is success? Actually, what is your purpose in life? And what do you term as success for you? Now, first of all, you're also stepping out CEO, you've been there, so you have a clear understanding of how you want to really put it down that I achieved my success this way. Yeah.
So my goal is to help people feel like they can be the best version of themselves. So some people want to be happy, like happiness is their goal. My job is to feel useful. And so I am most happy when I am put to use. So like I come over to your house for a dinner party, I'm going to be in the kitchen, like helping get food ready. Yeah, I like feeling useful. And I am starting a new business that is going to be a brand that called Rivet.
Yes.
And so the idea is that we will partner with existing companies, and when they sell certain products, so sneakers, colas, you name it, with the Rivet logo on it, young people know that a certain percentage of what they're spending will go into a global fund to fund young people's social change work. And I'm doing this because nobody wants to fund young people. I've spent 30 years raising money, and it's hard. And so the idea is, what if young people could fund other young people?
Because it's us that understand our struggles. Mm-hmm. So.
Young people spend $3 trillion every year. Think about that number, Mark. Young people control $3 trillion in spending.
That's right. The world has more young people than I.
A country like Uganda, right? It's mostly young people. And so the average young person may not have a lot of economic power. The millions of young people, if you add up how much you spend, that's a lot of money. Companies are desperate to connect with you. They spend $650 billion on adverts. Yeah. What if we could take a piece of that they're spending already, have it go towards Rivet? And so they're marketing this message that when you buy this product, it will go to fund other young people. And we think we could raise hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, think about we've given out $150,000 in Sub-Saharan Africa, which I'm incredibly proud of. What if that was 20 million? We funded 700 projects on the continent. What if that number was 500,000?
Number keeps increasing every other time. Definitely going to fund 12,000 at some point.
Think about what 500,000 youth-led change-making projects in Sub-Saharan Africa would look like. Now, some of them are small, some of them will fail, but in that 500,000 will be ideas that will change the way that we learn, take care of one another, take care of the planet. And they're not coming from the US and Europe, or even, the fancy universities, right? They're coming from places that are overlooked. That's what I want to do next, is radically change the funding model where young people get to fund other young people and turn their daily, everyday purchases, whether it's their data on their phone, their takeout, into philanthropic power. Every one of your listeners gets to be Bill Gates. That's what I want to do next.
Wow.
Then I'm going to retire.
I have a lot of young people that reach out to me about how they can get funding and granting and all this stuff, and they really have quite a number of ideas. I am so happy that I'm always just going to be referring to this first organization. There's one that could have probably been here, but I'll talk to Aziz about him. He has really a very good project that's going on. I feel like it's something that needs the attention it deserves. But this is also the legacy you're trying to leave behind, yeah? As Eric.
Yeah.
It's impressive stuff. Yeah. Basically, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming around the podcast.
Yeah.
It's been an honor. It's been quite a good conversation for me. And definitely I'm going to be learning a lot. I'm also going to be following up with my projects and showing some of my young friends how this can really help them. Yeah.
Pleasure's mine.
Thank you.